Hare Krishna, Mataji. Just continue reading. ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकाय चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. So we'll continue reading Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. Abhay started a Sankirtan movement in Jhansi. At first, accompanied only by Acharya Prabhakar, he used to walk about the neighborhood of Naibhashti, chanting Hare Krishna. As he continued this practice, his group gradually increased until 50 people were gathering regularly to go out on parikrama, chant together, and visit temples. Afterwards, they would gather at the Radha Memorial for an evening lecture. When Abhay would go to preach in the nearby villages, he would usually be accompanied by whatever league members were free. Once he went with Acharya Prabhakar on Padayatra, traveling on foot and preaching, to Chiragaon, some 20 miles from Jhansi. In Chiragaon, there lived a nationally known poet, Maithili Sharan Gupta, who received Abhay and his disciple at his home for dinner. Abhay told this host that since he was an accomplished poet, he should write something glorifying Krishna, and the poet agreed. After preaching in Chiragaon, Abhay and Prabhakar returned to Jhansi, spending one day in each of 5 villages along the way. At night, the villagers would gather and Abhay would lead Kirtan. He explained to Prabhakar that almost most of these simple farmers were not scholars in Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam. They could achieve the highest spiritual benefit simply by Kirtan. Abhay was well received by the villagers, who begged him to return soon, but to give them notice next time so that they could prepare a proper reception. While preaching locally, Abhay was simultaneously working to give an international scope to his league of devotees. He wrote to government agencies asking them to help him expand his genuine educational project, and he also tried to recruit preachers from amongst his friends. He wrote to his old college classmate, Rupen Mitra, in Calcutta, inviting him to join in worldwide missionary activities. My mission desires to train up 40 trainees, and I have asked help from the government for this useful educational purpose. I want that you may be one of the trainees in this regard, and you can ask Kartik Dada to join us in this spirit. You will know from the paper sent to you how we live and what we do. Thus, you can make up your mind whether it is possible for you to join us. The first thing is that we want to train up some retired men in the Vanaprastha life and some young men in the Brahmacharya life. I have no inclination for the sannyasa life, which is rather a difficult job for the fallen people of this age. The so-called sannyasis in red garments have spoiled the good name of such order of life. Abhay also asked Rupen, kindly let me know the charges of this advertisement in the English and vernacular papers of Calcutta. Educational. Wanted candidates from any nationality to qualify themselves as real Brahmins for preaching the teachings of Bhagavad Gita for all practical purposes throughout the whole world. Deserving candidates will be provided with free boarding and lodging. Apply. AAC Bhaktivedanta, founder and secretary of the League of Devotees, Bharati Bhavan, PO, Jhansi, Uttar Pradesh. Abhay wanted a deed stating that the Bharati Bhavan belonged to the League of Devotees. So far, he had only a promise. Thinking of Jhansi as a permanent headquarters, he wanted a written commitment. When he approached Reva Shankar Bhayal for a deed of gift, Mr. Bhayal gave Abhay a form requesting him to pay 500 rupees to register the buildings. But since Abhay had just suffered a loss of 7,000 rupees in Allahabad and had recently spent 3,000 in his preaching, much of it going towards the opening day festival, he found himself unable to raise even 500 rupees. Acharya Prabhakar, despite his academic position, had very little money and was being subsidized by his parents with 3 rupees a day. Most of Abhay's congregation, especially the students, were in a similar position. Mr. Bhayal's request of 500 rupees didn't seem urgent, nor did he say that would happen if Abhay couldn't pay. But he soon made another request. Mr. Abhay they should buy the Bharati Bhavan for 5,000 rupees. It was disconcerting. The generous gift had turned into a purchase offer. The people in town were already referring to the property as Abhay Bhaktivedanta's ashram, and the League of Devotees was printed in large letters across the wall of the compound. When pressed by Abhay's friends, Mr. Bhayal assured them that Abhay could go on living there. But ultimately, he would have to buy. Mr. Bhayal said he would give the League of Devotees first consideration and a good price. Abhay worried, not knowing what the landlord would do next. If the league could purchase the property, then would be best. But he had been unable to raise even 500 rupees. 5,000 seemed impossible. Abhay found no strong financial backing from his congregation. His league did not include even a single full time worker. He did not know of any way to raise money. His pharmaceutical business. He still had a small operation being run by his son in Calcutta. Abhay had formerly been earning 3,000 rupees a month. He considered approaching God Brothers for help, but the prospects for earning the money himself seemed more likely. For 30 years, he had earned money by his pharmaceutical business, and he could do it again for the most worthy cause. When he arrived in Calcutta in the spring of 1954, he was without money. He chose to live with his god brothers at the Gaudiya Sangha in Chetla, the same neighborhood his family lived in. Since he had no money, the head of the ashrama bore his expense. Abhay gave daily discourses on Srimad Bhagavatam, which the Gaudiya Sangha brahmacharis highly appreciated. Krishna Kumara Brahmachari, even after he left, his sweet, melodious voice would ring in my ears. He used to often express a desire to go abroad and preach. One of his sons were running a small business, Vimalton Laboratory, and thus supporting the family. Abhay knew that his wife would not be interested in his work in Jhansi. His son had been there but had not been impressed. The family would see his preaching in Jhansi as a threat to their home life. Abhay, however, was sustaining himself by his vision, which was now taking practical shape, of a world reformed by Krishna consciousness. He even thought of opening a branch of the League of Devotees in Calcutta. But inevitably, he was plunged again into family responsibilities. Some of his children were still unmarried, rent and bills had to be paid. Even if he were to develop the Vimalton laboratory, the family would demand whatever he earned, and even he were to accede to their demands, live at home and give up preaching, the greatest difficulty would still remain. They weren't serious about devotional service, nor could he change them. What was the use of conducting a business if they would not be devotees? He visited his family. The same old scene occurred. Local friends came to visit, and Abhay began preaching, giving Bhagavad Gita classes, just as he had been doing in Jhansi. Meanwhile, his wife and the rest of the family would take tea in a separate room. Srila Prabhupada, I wanted as much as possible to get her to work with me in spreading Krishna consciousness, to get her help. But she was very determined. She wouldn't help me in spreading Krishna consciousness. So finally, after many years, I could understand. She would not be any assistance to me. She was very attached to drinking tea. I was always telling her to not drink tea, but because I wanted to have a nice Vaishnava family. So, although I was repeatedly telling her, this time I finally said, you have to choose between me or tea. Either the tea goes or I go. In this way, I was even criticizing my own family. But because they were thinking I was the husband or father, they couldn't take my instruction seriously. So she replied, give up tea drinking or give up my husband? Well, I have to give up my husband then. Of course, she thought I was joking. One day, Radharani made a great mistake. There was a system of barter in which a customer would place on a scale an object a shopkeeper considered valuable, and the shopkeeper would then balance it with an equal weight of merchandise. So while Abhay was out, his wife took his worshipable Bhagavatam to the market and traded it for tea biscuits. When Abhay came home and looked for the book, she told him what had happened. She hadn't taken the matter as a very serious thing. She was out of tea biscuits, but Abhay was shocked. At first, he felt depressed, but then a wave of absolute resolution passed over him. his family life was finished. We can stop here. So here we are continuing to see how Srila Prabhupada is so determined, and he keep going on with his preaching activity, wanting to have the Radha Bhavan in his name, but he couldn't afford the 5,000 rupees or even 500 rupees. And now he's continuing, and then slowly we can see how he is focusing more and more on preaching activities and going closer to Krishna, and slowly the family life is getting detached with that.